Join me in learning Chitas together for the sixth Torah reading of Parshas Chayei Sara, chapter 25, verse 1. Today's class is L'Refuah Shalema of Avram ben Gilka for speedy recovery. Verse 1, chapter 25. Yesterday we discussed as Eliezer brought Rivka back to Yitzchak, Yitzchak marries Rivka, and all the great miracles that happened with Sarah happened with Rivka, and this brought great comfort to Rivka. Now that Yitzchak was married, Avram continues back in his relationship. If you recall yesterday, we spoke about that Yitzchak went to bring Hagar back to Avram. As the Torah now tells us about this as well. Vayosef Avram, and Avram now marries again. Vayikach Isha, and he took a woman, Ushma Keturah, and her name is Keturah. Who is this woman Keturah? So Rashi tells us as follows. According to Rashi, this woman Keturah, verse 1, Zu Hagar. This is Hagar. V'nikra Keturah, why was she called Keturah? Al Shem Shenoyim Aseh Kekteris, because her actions were as beautiful as the incense brought on the altar. V'shekasher Pischa, as well, comes from the word Keturah, comes from to tie. She tied her door, meaning Shalin is Davgala Adam Yem Shapir Sheme Avram. That she tied herself. She did not allow herself to be married to anyone else from the day that she left Avram until she came back to him at this very moment. Others explain as well that Keturah was the very fact that she converted, or others say that it might have been a second woman, but the simple interpretation is that it was Hagar. Verse 2. Vatei Gloi, she bore to him as Zimran, Yakshan, Vesmedan, Vesmidyon, Vesyishbak, Veshuach. Zimran, Yakshan, Medan, Midyan, Yishbak, and Shuach. Verse 3. The Yakshan Yolad Shva, and Yakshan was the father of Shva, Vesdedan, and of Dedan. Uvenei Dedan, and the children of Dedan, Hayu Ashurim, Latushim, Ulaumim. Were Ashurim, Latushim. Ashurim, as we're soon going to see, Rashi tells us what they were. They were tent dwellers. Latushim, that they were nomadic tent dwellers, and they were spread out in many different places, and La'umim, and other nations. As we see, Rashi will soon translate the detail of each one of them. Let's see Rashi, verse 3. Why were they given these names? Ashurim or Latushim, these are not names of individuals, but these are names of Shem Roshei Umes. They are names of nations that they came from. Targum Shel Unklis, the Aramaic translations over here, he talks about how they were different people who, by the actions of their lives, as we translated them, but this will not fit according to the simple interpretation of the verse. And the way that the Targum explains them is, as we mentioned, either that they had tents, or they would travel from place to place, or they lived in different nations. The word in Rashi, just to go in Rashi, Shapirish, that he tells us over here what the Targum tells us, Lamasharion, Loshin Machana, like a camp, V'tamer she'ina came pnei Aleph, she'in Yeseda, Sedlanu Teva, she'ina Bereshim Aleph, V'nitoisva, Aleph Bereshim, Kamei Deimes, Chaymes Anoch, Shumin Chen Raglaim, Chen Osuch Shaman, Shumin Verachta V'sachta. The Targum explains this to mean the word Machana, and you may say, how is this possible if there's no words with an aleph at the beginning of them, and they only added the aleph? So Rashi gives us some examples where we find it as well. Ulatushim, Heim Bali Oyolim, they were people of tents. Hamispazrim Ana va'ana, that they would travel in all different directions. The Noisim Ish Ba'ali Apadne, and each person would travel with his own tent. The Lamed and Nun are interchangeable. But over here, Latusha means people that were nomadic, going from place to place, they weren't settled in one place. Verse 5. And Avram gave everything he owned to Yitzchak, though these other children as well, but his bless, everything he owned, he gave to Yitzchak. Let's see Rashi. Being that we know that he gave everything he owned to Yitzchak, why does he mention it again? Amr Nechemya said, Birkas Yaske Nasanle. He gave him the blessings, meaning he gave him a document which is usually given as a person who's lying on their deathbed, and therefore they don't actually have to have a an acquisition, no transaction has to actually be made, but the very fact that he says it, that in itself is considered a transaction. Because God told him that it will be for a blessing. The blessings were given to you that you have the ability and you have the right to bless anybody you'd like. Avram is Sara and Yitzchak, and Avram gave them over to Yitzchak. Verse 6. And to the children of the sons of the concubine whom Avram had taken, Nasan Avram Atanis, Avram gave them gifts, and he sent them away while he sent them away from Yitzchak his son, while he was still alive, he sent them where? Eastward, as we'll soon see, Kedma, eastward, Al Eretz Kedem, to the land of Kedem, away from his son Yitzchak. Hapilakshim, what does it mean, Hapilakshim, the concubines? If you notice, it's missing Chaser Ksiv. It doesn't say, it says it without a Yud, Pilakshim, but the Chirak should be a Yud there. And the reason is because it's coming to minimize it. He only had one concubine, which was Hagar, he Keturah, which is Keturah. So why then does he use it multiple, using a plural? So what are they different? What's the difference between wives and concubines? So Rashi explains, Nashim biksuba. A wife is what you acquire and you have to give a contract, a marital contract, a ksuba. Upilakshim, but a concubine, those are the ones that he married without a marital contract. Kamrinu b'Sanhedrin, like it's discussed in Sanhedrin 21a. B'Nashim upilakshim the David, talking about the differences between that the King David had wives and he also had concubines. And the difference over there is the Talmud explains one was with a ketubah, with a marital contract, and one was without. The Rashi, Nasan Avram Atanis, Avram gave them gifts. If he already gave Yitzchak everything, so then what did he have to give to the children of the concubines? Pirshu Rabbi Seinu, our rabbis explain, Shem Tuma, he gave them actually the ability to utilize impurity, meaning to utilize for demons or magic, black magic. Masar Lahem, he gave them that they should be able to overcome, that they should not hurt them. Davar Acher, others explain something else, that he gave them gifts, Sarah. He gave them gifts that they accepted, that Avram got in the honor of Sarah. That means everything he had, some things were given in the honor of Sarah, and that's what he gave to them. That means he was given gifts, many gifts that were given to Avram. If you recall, whenever Sarah was taken away, they gave gifts to Avram because of her. Avram did not want to enjoy the pleasure from it. He didn't want Yitzchak to enjoy it as well, so therefore he gave it to these children. Verse 7, the Torah now begins to tell us about Abraham's death. These are the days and the years of Avram, Asher Chai, that he lived, Ma'as Shana, 100 years, V'shivim Shana, 70 years, V'chamesh Shanim, and 5 years. Avram lived 175 years. Rashi, why does, again, we mentioned, if you recall, in the beginning of Chayei Sara, when he splits up the years of Sarah, he also does this, that he splits up, he goes, Meya Shana, Shivim Shana. So Rashi explains this as well, Ben Kuf, Ben Ayim, when he was 100, he was like 70, when it came to L'koyach, as strength, that he never got weakened as an old age. Ben Ayin, Ben Hey, and when he was 70, he was like a child of 5 years old, without any sins. Vayigvai, Vayamas, and Avram breathed his last and died. Vayamas Avram, and Avram died b'seiva tova in an old age. This was in the year 2123 to the creation of the universe. And V'zakein as an old mellow and V'sava mellow Vayasef al Amma, and he was gathered to his people in the afterlife. Zakein V'sava, which means mellow and content at the end of his life. Verse 9. Vayikbru Oisa Yitzchak v'Yishmael banav, and Yitzchak and Yishmael his sons buried him. Where did they bury him? On the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, in the cave of the Machpelah. El stay Ephron, in the field of Ephron, Ben Seichar, the son of Seichar, Chiti the Hittite, Asher al Pnei Mamre, that was facing the plains of Mamre. Yitzchak and Yishmael, you'll notice that Yishmael has a reappearance again here, and that Yishmael came to bury his father. So Rashi tells us this is because Mikan, from here we learn, Sha'asa Yishmael tshuva, Yishmael repented, V'hilachas Yitzchak, And he allowed Yitzchak to go before him, though technically Shmuel was older, Lefanov before him. Zu Yiseva Teva Shenemra Avram. Therefore, it says by Avram that he passed at an old age, mellow and content, which was content with the fact that Avram saw that his son Yishmael also repented at the end of his life. Verse 10. Hasad Asharkan Avram, this is the field that Avram acquired, Meis Bnei Ches from the Hittites. Shama Kuber Avram, that's where Avram was buried. And Visham Vesara Ishtay, and Sarah his wife. Verse 11. Vayhi Achri Meis Avram, and it was after Avram died, Vayivarech Elikim es Yitzchak b'nei, and God blessed Yitzchak his son. Vayeshev Yitzchak in Be'er Lachiroi, and Yitzchak settled in the vicinity of Be'er Lachiroi. Rashi, verse 11. Vayhi Achri Meis Avram. Once Avram died, so therefore God came to comfort him. Did Nichum Avel and Peter Shiva call, as we want to call it, blessed him with the blessing of comforting the mourners. Davar Acher, another reason why, what does it mean that God blessed him here? Even though that God gave the blessings to Avram, Nisyare, Avram was worried Yitzchak to bless Yitzchak with it. Because he saw he saw that Esau was going to come from Yitzchak, so therefore Avram didn't want to bless him necessarily. Omar, Avram said, Yovi balabrachis, rather let the one who gave the blessings, which is Almighty God himself, and bless who he wishes. Therefore God came along and blessed Yitzchak. This concludes the 6th Torah reading of Parshas Chayei Sara.